Welcome students to another week of biology with Mr. Miguel. This week we will be taking a closer look at living things. These are our objectives for the week. Number one is to identify the traits that make living things distinguishable. That means, how can we distinguish one group of living thing from another group of living thing? So before we look at that, let us review a little bit about the characteristics of living things. Living things have more than 10 characteristics. For any living thing to be considered a living thing, it needs to fulfill all the characteristics. On the slide, you're able to see approximately 13 examples. So all living things need to reproduce, they need to obtain nutrition, they respire, they grow, they excrete, they move, and they respond to stimuli, which is sensitivity. Those are the old and traditional characteristics of living things. Nowadays, living things also need to follow these characteristics. The first one is cellularity. Are they composed of cells? If they are composed of cells, they are considered living things. Do they undergo homeostasis? That means, are they able to maintain an internal environment of equilibrium? Do they have ordered complexity? That means, are they made out of atoms? Are the atoms forming molecules, the molecules forming macromolecules, the macromolecules forming organelles, the organelles forming the cells, and so on? Do they have DNA? That is part of heredity. Do they undergo metabolism, which is similar to the utilization of energy? Do they have chemical reactions going on within their bodies? And finally, are they able to evolve? By evolution, we mean, are they able to change through time? So when we study living things, we need to keep these characteristics in mind. You will see towards the end of this presentation how these characteristics can be used to classify certain organisms as non-living. So our second and third objective go hand in hand. The first is to classify organisms into living things according to traits and to identify their relative importance to humans. This means we will be looking at each living organism, their traits of each group, and we will look at how they are important and relevant to humans. So let us delve in. What are the organisms that we will be looking at? We will be looking at groups, yes, and we will be looking at these organisms. We will be looking at the prokaryote, which are those organisms whose cells do not have a nucleus. We will also be looking at eukaryotes. Together, these are known as domains. Under each domain, we have kingdoms. For prokaryotes, which are cells in prokaryotes, which are cells without a nucleus, we have the archaebacteria, and we also have the eubacteria. And these two types of bacteria are relatively important to humans. So prokaryotes have archaebacteria and eubacteria, which are the two kingdoms. When we talk about eukaryotes, we are talking about animals, plants, protists, and fungi. So we will be looking at each individual group, specifically these groups. So let us start with the first kingdom of life. The first kingdom of life is archaebacteria. And archaebacteria are a type of bacteria that is thought to have lived for millions of years ago. Okay? So millions of years ago, we had the formation of archaebacteria. These archaebacteria, the word says it. Archae, if you don't know what archae means ancient bacteria. So ancient bacteria are referred to as archaebacteria. Normally, these bacteria live in extreme conditions. By extreme conditions, I mean where there's a lot of acid, where there's a lot of salt, where temperatures are extremely cold and temperatures are extremely hot. So these kingdom of life, archaebacteria, are known to live in extreme conditions. So what are some of the characteristics of archaebacteria? Archaebacteria tend to be unicellular. That means they're composed of one cell. They live in extreme environments, and here I give you some examples of the extreme environments. It is thought that about 500 million years ago, the Earth was not the way it was today. It was very hot, and bacteria needed to adapt to these extreme conditions. Archaebacteria in particular learned how to live in near volcanoes, and as time progressed, they were able to evolve into other types of organisms. Why are they important? They are important in recycling material. They recycle material from on the environment. They are also important because certain products that we obtain from archaebacteria can be used for human consumption. That does not necessarily mean for food intake. Consumption means humans can use it. We have one example. Methanogens. Methanogens are a type of archaebacteria that they can produce a gas that is known as methane. And methane, if you're able to harvest it, you can use it to cook your own food and power your stove. So that's more or less how archaebacteria are relevant to us. Another type of bacteria, which is the second kingdom, very important to humans, is eubacteria. What are some of the traits eubacteria expose? Well, they're unicellular and they are very common and cosmopolitan. That means that they can live in soil, they can live in your skin, in your stomach also. They're important decomposers, meaning that in the environment they break down material that is dead and return the nutrients back to the soil. They can also be used to repair pollution. Certain bacteria are put. So recently it has been discovered that certain bacteria are able to degrade plastic. Even slowly, they're able to return the plastic back to the environment. Some can cause disease. In this example, we can see this type of bacteria known as Streptococcus living in this individual's throat, causing a huge infection of the tonsils. It must be very painful, and some bacteria can cause disease, but majority are beneficial for humans. Also, some bacteria are used in the production of medicine. We have a little chemical that is known as insulin. Insulin can be produced by bacteria once they have been engineered. So these are some of the importances and some of the traits of eubacteria. So eubacteria are very common and around us. They're the modern type of bacteria and they are unicellular. They can work together, but the organism itself is made out of one cell. So this covers more or less the prokaryotic kingdom. The third kingdom we will talk about is Protista. Protista is this type of group that is considered to be artificial. That means that all of the organisms in the Protista kingdom are superbly different from each other. They are so different that it is hard to find any relationship between them. They are known to be eukaryotic organisms, and by eukaryotic organisms we refer to as the cells within the Protist kingdom. They contain nucleus. They can be unicellular or colonial or multicellular. And they also have different lifestyles. That means some of them are photosynthetic, meaning that they can produce their own food, or they can be heterotrophic, which means that they rely on other organisms, they eat other organisms in order to remain alive. Let us look at the importance. Why are protists important? Well, protists are important because many of them form the foundation of food chains. Out in the sea, you are not able to see plants, but you're able to see protists, which are known as algae, and they're the ones who continuously produce oxygen to supply oxygen to other organisms. Also, protists, certain protists, are able to cause severe disease in humans. In my example here, I have malaria, and malaria, it's a parasite under the kingdom protist that can enter the cell through a mosquito, enter the body through a mosquito bite, and destroy all the red blood cells in your body, causing death. Almost 300,000 or even more than 300,000 people in the world die of malaria each year. So it's a serious disease. Also, in my example here, you're able to see this organism. It is known as an amoeba. It lives in fresh water. Sometimes if you go to the river, you're able to acquire amoeba. And amoeba can cause very severe gastrointestinal issues. So this is more or less why Protista is relevant to us. 1, they can cause severe disease. 2, they form the basis of certain food chains. And what are some characteristics? They are an artificial group, meaning that all of them are substantially different from each other. One thing that unifies all of them is that they are all eukaryotic. That is the kingdom Protista. Moving into one of the most fascinating kingdoms, let us talk about fungi. It is a kingdom of life, and the characteristics are the following. They have cell walls. The cells, fungi have cell walls made out of chitin or chitin, as you can see here. Chitin, so let us say this is a fungal cell. It has a cell wall, but the cell wall is different than that of the bacteria, and it is different than the plant cell wall because this cell wall is made out of chitin. They're all eukaryotic, meaning that the cells have a nucleus. They're multicellular, but in this example that I'm showing you here, this example is a yeast and it is unicellular. So fungi can be unicellular and multicellular. And they're external heterotrophs. That means that they need to be consuming other organisms in order to survive. I know that some of you know some examples of fungi because you've seen them around. This would be a mushroom. Mushroom are a type of fungi. Then on certain logs, you're able to see like little ears. Those can be fungi. Why are they important to us? And this is very important that you remember. First of all, to the environment, they are important because they break down the material that is dead. They break down decaying matter. So decaying organic matter is returned to the soil by fungi. They also produce medicine. In this case, I provided you an example like penicillin. Penicillin is an antibiotic that works against bacteria. And penicillin is primarily obtained from the Penicillium mold, which is a fungi. They also produce industrial products like bread, cheese, beer, and they can also be eaten, like the mushroom that you can add on the pizza. that's a fungi. The penicillin that is used in medicine, that's a fungi. The beer, the wine, and the cheese is done using a fungi. The bread is used with the use of a fungi. The fungi is the yeast or levadura, as those of you who can bake, you're able to sympathize with this. So what are the traits? Fungi have cell walls, but the cell walls are made out of chitin. They are eukaryotic, means that they have a nucleus, and they rely on consuming other organisms in order to survive. That is the kingdom fungi. Moving on, plant kingdom. So plants are known to be eukaryotic. That means their cells contain a nucleus. And they are multicellular, meaning that they are made out of many, many cells. They also have cell walls, just like fungi. They have cell walls. But guess what? The cell walls are different because they're made out of cellulose. That is the difference between the fungi and the plant cell wall. And more importantly, they are autotrophic, means that they produce their own food in order to survive. So they use the sunlight, they obtain carbon dioxide and water, they combine the carbon dioxide and water with the use of sunlight to produce food. So they're the basis of the food chain. So here I have the importance, which is they are a source of food for us humans. They can be used as fuel para esas personas que todavía usan leña. Plants are a source of fuel. Building materials, many houses possess a lot of wood. They can be used as medicine, and they also prevent erosion. So there's many importances of plants. I only included some, but it can be many more. Okay? So what makes them so different is that their cells are made out of, or have cell walls composed of cellulose. They're eukaryotic, they're multicellular, and they are autotrophic, meaning that they can produce their own food. Can fungi produce their own food? The answer is no. Fungi cannot produce their own food. Plants can. Lastly, we have the animal kingdom. So the animal kingdom, the cells are eukaryotic. They're multicellular organisms, meaning that the organism is made out of many cells. They don't have any cell walls, only a cell membrane, no cell walls. They're internal heterotrophs, meaning that they have to consume the food and enter their body, and that's how they obtain nutrition. And they're important to us humans because many of those animals are a source of food, especially protein. Okay, so animals, they are a very good source of protein. And animals also keep the ecosystem healthy. Down here we have Mr. Miguel. Okay. So those are the kingdoms of life which I promised we were going to observe. So let's move into viruses. Are viruses living? Are they living organisms? First of all, are they organisms? Yes, they have a certain level of organization, but they are not living. Why are they not living? So viruses are not living. They're not living things. They cannot fulfill the characteristics of living things, which are they're not made out of cells, they are unable to grow, they are unable to maintain homeostasis. So these are some examples of why viruses are classified as non-living organisms. Why are they organisms? Because they're organized. But are they living? No, they're not living things. And viruses can infect a wide host of kingdoms. In this example, we have this virus. It's known as a bacteriophage T4. Are they harmful to humans? No, but they can infect bacteria. So this virus attacks bacteria, kingdom Eubacteria. The influenza virus. What kingdom can it attack? The animal kingdom. The last virus, is a tobacco mosaic virus, and it can attack plants. So as you can see, viruses do not belong to any kingdom. They are not living things. They cannot fulfill the characteristics of living things, but they are very important because they can cause disease. They're pathogens, so they can cause disease, and they can be used in genetic engineering. So those are more or less what I have on the living things.